working with if we have no common coefficients. So yesterday when we learned the elimination method, we saw that if we had common coefficients, if our x was both 3x on both of them, that we could subtract them down and just get rid of our x. Well, today we're going to figure out what we do if we don't have any common coefficients next to any of our variables. How do we solve that? So if there are no common coefficients, you will multiply one or both equations by some number to create one matching opposite coefficients. You multiply one or both equations by some number to create one matching opposite coefficients. So when I say matching opposites, I don't necessarily mean like a positive and a negative. I just mean there's one coefficient in the top one that's the same as one coefficient in the bottom one. So they're just matching opposite equations. So how do we do this? In number one, we have x plus 3y equals 6, and we have 2x minus 7y equals 1. We can see here we do not have any common coefficients, so I have to think, what would be the easiest way to still keep these equations as simple as I can make them, but still have a common coefficient? So I'm going to look at my bottom one, since I have two coefficients with my two variables. I have a 2x and I have a 7y. Where in my top one, I have a 3y, but just an x. I only have a 1 with my x. So looking here, I know that I can easily multiply 1 by something to get 2. What multiplies by 1 to get 2?
2.
2. So I'm going to multiply my whole top equation by 2. When I do that, that turns it into 2x plus 6y equals 12. Then all I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over my bottom equation just as it was. So I have 2x minus 7y equals negative 1. Now, since I multiplied my top equation by 2, I do have a common coefficient in my x. Both of my x's coefficients are 2. So since I have a positive 2 and a positive 2, remind me from yesterday, does that mean I'm going to add these or am I going to subtract these?
You're going to add.
I'm going to subtract these because they're both a positive 2. So that means I'm going to subtract them. So I'm going to put my parentheses around my bottom equation, and I'm going to subtract them down. So 2 minus 2 is 0. That eliminates my x. Now I have a 6 minus a negative 7. That's going to switch me to 6 plus 7. So I have plus 13y equals a 12 minus a negative 1. Again, can't subtract my negatives, so I have 12 plus 1, and I have 13. So that gives me 13y equals 13. All I've left to do is get y by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by 13, and I get y equals 1. Now that I have my y, I can plug it back into one of my equations up here. But I'm going to plug it back into my original equation, not the one that I multiplied. I'm still going to use the top one, but I'm just going to use it as it was. So I have x plus 3 times 1 equals 6. have my x and my y, I know that my solution is 3, 1. Does anybody have any questions at all about that first equation? I'm going to go down to number 3. So I have 3x minus y equals 14, and I have 5x plus 4y equals 12. So here, I have no common coefficients, so I gotta kind of think about it. What will be my easiest way to multiply one of my equations and still keep it simple? So I see in my top one, I have just a y by itself. I have no coefficient with it. So I'm going to use that equation because my bottom one already has coefficients with both of my variables. So what can I multiply my y by? 4. I'm going to multiply my whole top one by 4. When I do that, my equations turn into 12x minus 4y equals 14. And then I just bring over my bottom one, where I have 5x plus 4y equals 12. I have a negative 4y and a positive 4y. So am I going to add these or subtract these?
Add in.
You are going to add these. Now that I know I'm going to add them, I'm just going to add them straight down. So I have 12 plus 5, that gives me a 17x. I have 4y, negative 4y plus 4, that is 0. And then 14 plus 12. Thank you. Sorry guys. I have to multiply my full equation. I forgot to multiply 14. 14 times 4 is 56. 56 plus 12 is 68. There we go. Alright, I apologize. Is everyone still with me?
Yeah.
Cool. So that gives us 17x equals 68. I still have to get x by itself. So I'm going to divide each side by 17. When I do that, that gives me x equals 4. Do we have any questions about how we got here? Now that I have my x, I can plug it back into my equation to get my y. So I'm going to plug it back into my top one. So I have 3 times 4 minus y equals 14. When I multiply that, I get 12 minus y equals 14. I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. So I have negative y equals 2. I still don't have y by itself because y is negative, so I have to get y to be positive. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1, where I will get y equals negative 2. Now I have my x, I have my y, I know my solution is for negative 2. I'm going to go to number 4. So we have x plus y equals negative 3, and I have 5x minus 2y equals negative 50. So looking here, I have just an x and just a y in my top equation, and I have a 5x and a 2y in my bottom. So really, I could multiply either. But looking at it, what would be easiest? Is it easier to multiply things by 5 or 2? In your opinion?
2.
2. Just doubling things is the simplest, easiest way to go. So we are going to multiply the whole equation by 2 on the top. That makes negative 6. And then I'm going to bring my bottom one straight over. 5x minus 2y equals negative 50. Because I have a positive 2 and a negative 2, I'm going to add these together. Now that I've seen I'm going to add, I've multiplied, my equations are set, I'm just going to add straight down. So I have 2 plus 5 is a 7x plus 0 to get rid of my y's. I have negative 6 plus negative 50, which gives me negative 56. That gives me 7x equals negative 56. To get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 7. So I get x equals negative 8. Now that I have my x, I'm going to plug it back into my top equation here to get my y. So I have negative 8 plus y equals negative 3. To get y by itself, all I'm going to do is add 8 to both sides. And I have y equals 5. So now I have my x, I have my y. My solution is negative 8, 5. Any questions about either of these examples before I erase them? Alright, I'm going to go to number 6. So I have 3x plus y equals 2, and I have 6x plus 2y equals 4. Here, I see that I have a 2y on the bottom, and I have just a y on the top. So to make common coefficients, oh my gosh, I'm going to multiply my whole top equation by 2. When I do that, I get that 3x times 2 is 6x plus 2y equals 4. I'm going to bring my bottom equation over for 6x plus 2y equals 4. What do you notice about these two equations now?
Non-solution.
Yes, it is all equally the same. Because they're the same, I'm just going to subtract these. By when I subtract them, that gives me 0 plus 0 equals 0. We know that 0, in fact, does equal 0. So what do you guys think this means?
Non-solution.
Not no solution, infinite solutions. When they are the same, you have infinite solutions. Which, quizzing you again, going back to 7.1, what does that mean? Same line. Alright, going to number 9. 5x plus 9y equals negative 10, and 7x plus 10y equals negative 1. Here, both of my equations have coefficients next to both of their variables. So here's one of the examples where I'm going to have to multiply both equations to get a common coefficient. So here, I'm looking, what are my smaller coefficients by my variables? Are my x's smaller or are my y's smaller? My x's are smaller. I have a 5 and a 7, and my y's are a 9 and a 10. So I'm going to make my x's my common coefficient. So I'm going to multiply my whole top equation by 7. I'm whole bottom equation by 5. When I do this, my equations will turn into, my top one will be 35x plus 63y equals negative 70. My bottom equation will be 35x plus 50y equals negative 5. Because both of my common coefficients are a positive 35, I'm going to subtract these equations. So I'll put my parentheses around my bottom one, and I'm going to subtract down. So I have 35 minus 35 gives me 0. 63 minus 50 gives me 13. Negative 70 minus 5. Can't do that because I can't subtract a negative. So I have negative 70 plus 5 gives me negative 65. Taking out that 0, that gives me 13y equals negative 65. To get y by itself, I have to divide both sides by 13. And that gives me that y equals negative 5. Now that I have my y, I can plug it into either one of my original equations to get my x. So I'm just going to use my top one. So I have 5x plus 9 times negative 5 equals negative 10. When I multiply that, I get 5x minus 45 equals negative 10. First things first, I have to add 45 to both sides. So I have 5x equals 35. When I divide both sides by 5, the x by itself, I get 5 equals 7. X equals 7. That didn't sound right. It came out of my mouth. So now I have my x, I have my y, so I have 7, negative 5 as my solution. Does anybody have any questions about any part of that example? We're going to go down to number 10. So I have a 2x equals 4y plus 18. I have a negative 5x minus 6y equals 3. So I have two things wrong in this one. Can anyone tell me what the... Obviously my first one is that I have no common coefficient. Can anyone tell me what my second problem is? Yes. Yes, the equal signs are not in the same spot. So I'm also going to have to move my equal sign to be the same on both sides. So I want my equal sign over at the end of that first equation. So first I'm going to change that around. So I'm going to subtract 4y to my other side. So I have 2x minus 4y equals 18. And I have negative 5x minus 6y equals 3. I haven't multiplied anything yet. All I did was move my equal sign over in my first equation so that my equations are lined up right. Now that I've done that, now I can look and see what I have to multiply to get a common coefficient. So we see here, neither of these have just an x or just a y. So I am going to have to multiply both equations again. For here, you guys tell me as a little quiz question. It's okay if you don't know. What variable do you think I'm going to multiply to get x or y?
X. Y.
You are going to do y, and I'm going to tell you why. We're going to do y because we have a 4 and we have a 6. What? These both have a common multiple where you don't have to multiply by very big numbers. 6 times 2 is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. If I were to do the x's and I were to just multiply them by the opposites, that would give me way too big numbers on the top and the bottom. Because multiplying the whole top one by 5 would give me a negative 20y. And that's a little, you just gotta think about it in a way of what is the way to get my smallest solution. So I'm gonna multiply my whole top equation by 3. And I'm gonna multiply my whole bottom equation by 2. Does anyone have any questions as to why I'm doing that?
I guess not really like why are you doing that, but does it really like matter? Like if I did the 5, the opposite thing, would I still get the same answer?
Yeah, you would,
So it's just
but
like
it would just
weird-
create more work for yourself. When I multiply these out, that turns my equations into 6x minus 12y equals 54 for my top one. And for my bottom equation,
18.
I get negative 10x minus 12y equals 6. Since I have a negative 12y and a negative 12y, I'm going to subtract these two equations. Put parentheses around my bottom one and subtract down. So I have 6 minus negative 10, but I can't subtract a negative. So I have 6 plus 10, which gives me 16x. Negative 12 plus 12 gives me a 0. And 56 minus 6 gives me 48. When I take out my 0, I get 16x equals 48. X by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 16. And I get x equals 3. Now that I have my x, I can plug it back into one of my original equations to get my y. So I'm going to plug it back into my top one here. So I have 2 times 3 equals 4y plus 18. That gives me 6 equals 4y plus 18. First, I'm going to subtract 18 from both sides. So I have negative 12 equals 4y. When I divide both sides by 4 to get y by itself, I get y equals negative 3. I have my x, I have my y, so my solution is 3, negative 3. Alright, last one, number 11. I have 2x plus 4y equals 6, and I have 3x equals 12 minus 6y. So this is kind of similar to that last one. My equal signs are not in the same spot, so first I'm going to have to move that over. I want to move my equal sign to the end. So when I do that, I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides of my bottom equation. So that brings my top one over, 2x plus 4y equals 6. And when I move around my bottom equation, I get 3x. And instead of moving that 12 over, I'm actually going to add that 6y over. So that we can have some positives to work with. So I'm going to have 3x plus 6y equals 12. Does anyone have any questions about what we've done so far? Now that my equations are all lined up, I can see what I have to multiply here to get my common coefficients. So when I look, what? Do you guys think we'll multiply our x or our y? X. All I have to do to get a common coefficient is I'm going to multiply my x's by each other. I'm going to multiply my top equation by 3. I'm going to multiply my bottom equation by 2. By doing that, that gets us to our most simple equations we can get to work with. We're going to get both of our x's to be 6 our top equation turns to be 6x plus 12y equals 18. And my bottom equation becomes 6x plus 12y equals 24. Does anyone notice anything about these ones?
X and Y both.
My x and my y are both going to cancel out.
It means it's no function.
Yes. I'm going to subtract these down. So my x turns to 0, my y turns to 0, but 18 minus 24 is negative 6. 0 plus 0 is 0, so that gives me 0